Chapter 5, Exploration. Oh my goodness. We just started, and I'm like, they have matching swimsuits. And they're green, because of course they are. It's too funny. I love this. How much longer?
30 seconds.
Ugh. I lowered myself carefully back into the water, keeping a firm grip on the side of the pool before I raised myself to standing again using only my leg strength. We'd been at the exercises for a while now, and we're almost done with today's workout. Lance was a very dedicated pseudo-physical therapist. There was definitely a danger to him having all the information in the world at his fingertips and the ability to process it in minutes. He could become a near expert in just about anything in far too short a time. And he was determined to get my full strength back up as soon as possible.
Time!
Ugh. I let myself sink into the water, letting up a long stream of bubbles from under the surface. The distorted sound of Lance's laughter made it to my ears. My pouting never bothered him. Not much seemed to, if I was being honest. I broke the surface again, slicking my hair back from my face before I moved to the underwater ledge on the shallower side of the small pool. Legs stretched out in front of me, I leaned my head back against the edge and watched the heavy clouds sweep across the sky. He had, surprisingly, pulled through in finding us something to wear for swimming. It wasn't the right fabric, but it was functional. And I had to admit he had been right. The pool was amazing. I let out a pleased groan now that he wasn't breathing down my neck about the exercises he'd found. It was as if all the pain and tension faded from my body. I loved it. Not that the exercises were that strenuous, but I was shocked how sore the first day left me. Even so, it seemed to help, so I was all for it. Lance settled beside me, resting his arms on the edge of the pool.
It was strange for me at first when I saw how much humans love water.
Really? Why is that?
Thalassans weren't, as a whole, fond of it. Most of them couldn't swim. Or at least I assumed so. It wasn't something they did.
I wonder if it's because there's so little surface water on Arcalis. Just the Infinity Sea and a few small inland seas nearby.
Meanwhile, your homeworld is over 70% water, isn't it?
It's your home world too now. Lucky you, you have two of them.
I suppose you're right.
We're far from Earth now, but I suppose some traits are inherent. They had pools and swimming on the caravan ships. So I suppose the love for swimming persisted.
I never imagined it would be so relaxing when I was king. But Deimos has always loved it. It was a new yet old experience when I tried it for the first time after we... you know.
So Thalassans didn't swim, huh? That's interesting.
They were adapted to live in dry environments. The sea was something they viewed with fascination and fear, like an ancient scar dividing the world in two.
What were they like? I've always thought it was strange the colonists didn't put more time into learning about them in those early years before everything sort of went south.
Oh, there was a team assigned to that research. They were stationed in Avalon and broke off communications when the Civil War started, though. When I saw how things were flowing, I hid all data referencing the location of Avalon. At the time, I believed the fighting would cease if the mainframe was out of the picture, but that meant scrubbing the data about the control centers and shutting them down. The Avalon team's last point of contact was the team in Brazil. When that final control center came under attack, I locked down that entire dome. But the team out here lived mostly unaffected by the war. Eventually there were others who joined them and...
That's the origin of the Nomos.
Correct!
I never learned anything like that. There's a lot that appears to have been taught a little different than it happened.
History is like that. The ones that record it are the ones that decide with what tone to paint events.
That's true. In every culture, on every world, I'd assume. I sat up and smiled at him. So the Nomos started out as researchers looking into the planet's history. That's so cool.
Many of them still do that. They're a culture that values such things. They remember the early days of colonization even if others don't remember the same facts. And they're now among the only people who know the location of Avalon, as well as my secret.
Among the only? So others are aware of it as well?
There's one other who knows the story of Deimos and King.
Who is that?
Magnus Ulrich.
The head of Endgame?
We talked before, and we still talk. Sometimes.
He's even honest about that. Kudos. Kudos, Lance. Have you talked since I arrived?
Yes, once.
And you haven't told him about me?
Well, I don't really want to. And I know you don't want me to either.
Interesting. So he's very open and honest, but he hasn't told Magnus that Morgan is here. Or at least, that's what he's telling us. But he hasn't given me any reason to believe he's being untruthful. Maybe if Magnus outright asked him, he would tell Magnus? But I wonder if Magnus also would not outright ask him. So that way he can just be like, I can honestly say I don't know where she is, even if I might suspect anything. Okay. So he could have turned me over at any time, but had not. He hadn't mentioned that until this moment. He could have contacted them even when I was unconscious, but didn't because he knew I wouldn't want it. Thank you, Lance. I feel like I haven't said it enough. For everything.
You have thanked me many times, Morgan. You don't have to do it again.
But I want to. The sudden mention of Endgame earlier stirred a familiar feeling in the pit of my stomach. It had started a few days ago. I'd been trying to ignore it. It was uncomfortable, lurking in the corners of my mind, plaguing my heart in quiet moments. Because I was much better, maybe not completely back to normal, but well enough to start thinking about the future. I'd hoped giving myself another week with Lance would somehow shed light on a path I hadn't considered before. That some other way would open up. But of course, that hadn't happened. I was here in the waste trying to recover while life in the domes went on without me, and I had to make a decision about when I would return. The last Lance and I had discussed the situation there. Nyx and Endgame were still looking for me, while Crimson had given up. Slackers. And a group called the Host he wasn't sure about. But none had figured out where I was yet. Part of me wanted to shove all that aside and stay out here as long as I could pretend there wasn't anyone waiting for my return in the domes. But Mum was starting to ask when I was coming back, what the plans were, how I was going to handle it all. And I didn't have an answer. Endgame. Maybe it was time to just contact them. I leaned my elbows on the bar as I watched Lance humming to himself and mixing in ingredients as he cooked.
Oh, I forgot.
He turned around and held a hand out as a spice canister from across the room flew to him. Fancy. My eyes went wide at the small show of telekinesis. I don't see you do that very often. In fact, half the time I forgot he was an Esper at all.
I rarely need to, but I need to watch the eggs to make sure they don't overcook.
A practical use of telekinesis, but... Hey, do you think... I mean, could you show me how to do it?
I didn't think you wanted to learn. You've said nothing about it since you arrived.
Nice, are we training with Lance? Let's go! I guess I figured it might be wise to learn some. For self-defense. If I found a way to go back that didn't involve me landing in Endgame's lab, it would be better to have at least some understanding of my own abilities. A look of sadness flashed across Lance's face, and I think he suspected right away I was contemplating my return to the cities. Oh, how could you break this sweet boy's heart? He turned off the heat and covered the pan with a glass lid before he looked up at me.
I understand. Though I hate to imagine that you will need to defend yourself from anyone. However, that's idealistic. Even I have to give thoughts to such things sometimes. I'll do it. Though I'm not sure I'm the best teacher for a queen rank. Once you grasp utilizing your psi consciously, it all comes down to mental image. I can at least help with that much.
Mental image?
Much of what we accomplish with Psi requires us to imagine accomplishing it beforehand. This process of mental image even allows people to pre-program their Psi energy with commands that can be carried out without active focus.
He moved away from the cooktop and retrieved 2 shallow bowls from the cabinet.
Such as setting a psychic trap for someone, or a defense mechanism of some kind.
I didn't know that kind of thing was possible. Though, I never had an interest in learning about it before. Trent had probably known. Now I wish I'd paid more attention to his research. Lance set the bowls down and pulled the lid off the pan from before.
I suppose for people who aren't Espers, or living as Espers, it's unnecessary knowledge.
He spooned into each bowl 1 poached egg and the surrounding sauce before garnishing it with chopped herbs from the greenhouse. It smelled amazing.
As I understand it, queen ranks have a unique way of visualizing Psi, turning their perception of it into a clearer image than the rest of us can create. That's something you'd find helpful, I think.
A visual image of Psi. I thought about it as he got the rest of the meal together, without my help as usual. Back when I first woke up, I kept feeling something was weird about my eyes. Even at the same time I'd known it wasn't my eyes, really. It was more like seeing an overlay of static over things, though the static was just in my head. Over the next few days, I was too distracted with pain to pay attention to it, but I wondered if that was my mind coming to terms with a brand new ability to sense Psi energy. But I wasn't sure how to turn that into a functioning visualization of Psi. Was I sensing Lance's Psi right now? I had no idea.
What are you contemplating so hard?
I guess I was thinking it's strange I don't know how my own abilities work. How to visualize Psi, how to sense it, how to tell when I'm sensing it. I don't know how to do any of it.
I have heard that queens can struggle to break down how they use their abilities, because it comes so natural to them. So much so they can spend years using them without realizing.
He set a plate of flat bread down and moved to sit beside me.
When I first became aware of myself alone in Avalon, and I was struggling to make sense of the jumble of memories in my head, I didn't remember how to walk. I mean, I did in a way, but also I couldn't work out how it was done, even though walking is an almost automatic ability for most people. You don't think about picking your foot up, moving it, and setting it back down. You do it without mentally going through the steps. Even though Deimos had been walking all his life, King had never walked before at all. That contradiction was disorienting.
How is it for the AI to use Psi, by the way? Because I'm like, you know, you're technology, but you have this, like, almost magical ability now. It's interesting. He laughed a little as he remembered. Even though I already knew the memories from that time were more painful than he let on.
I kept forgetting how to move my legs, as strange as it sounds. The more I tried to break down the process into what I knew walking entailed, the more I would find myself unable to even start. How does one move one's foot? How does one lift one's leg or propel themselves forward? It was confusing. For many Espers, using Psi is also like that. Sometimes the more you try to work out the how, the more difficult it becomes. That's why so many of us rely on mental image rather than step-by-step process. If you can break it into a process, it helps, but that's not always the best place to start.
I'm not even sure what kind of mental image to search for or produce. Lance set his hands on the sides of my face, shifting his thumbs to gently close my eyes. We don't have to do this right this minute.
It won't hurt the food to cool a little, and you'll pick it up fast.
I imagine I'll struggle more than you think.
I highly doubt that. You've proved yourself to be very adaptable, several times over. Now the easiest way is to close your eyes and try to not focus on the sounds around you or anything else. Psi perception is like any other sense. When you block out some, the body focuses on the others. You can even cover your ears if it helps.
At least for the time being, I decided to just keep my eyes closed. Lance stopped speaking, and the room was silent. Just the sound of my breathing. At first there was nothing, but all too quickly there was a glimmer in the dark. Something soft, violet, and wavering. Like smoke or light. Wait, what is that? I snapped my eyes back open and it was still there, swirling around Lance in gentle waves. I squeezed my eyes shut and opened them again, but the strange smoke-like substance remained. It was like an image in my mind that overlaid against the real world, like the static from before. Lance was giving me an expectant, knowing smile.
You see? Queen ranks are naturals at using their psi. It's one of their strengths. Maybe one of their weaknesses as well. The reason they're difficult to detect is because they instinctively mimic the psi of the surrounding people. Usually without realizing.
And then it poofed away. I didn't know anything about how to do that, though. It felt like it was levels away from just seeing psi. Without thinking, I reached out a hand to touch the smoky violet light. And I was startled to realize the same sort of light, shimmery smoke was around my hand as well. Not my hand, but me. Unlike Lance's, which was violet, mine was colorless. Sort of transparent, but also white-ish, I suppose? As soon as my hand neared Lance, tendrils of white and violet hooked into each other, and the violet bled into my psi, just like watching dye dropped into water. How did I never see this before?
Sometimes we don't see it because we're not looking. Or sometimes we don't want to see. The mind learns to block things out. Like blocking out the white noise of this room's environmental controls. But once you pay attention, you realize it was there all along.
But how do I do things with it? Lance pointed to the spice container from earlier with his fork before he took a bite of his food.
Try lifting it.
Lifting it how? I frowned as I stared at it. The most obvious mental image for me in that moment was wrapping the smoke around the container and using it like an extension of my body. To my shock, that's exactly what happened. Like Lance had said, it was so natural, as if I was just taking a step. Lance is also a very good teacher of Psi. He can do no wrong. I couldn't even explain how I did it. I just did, as if I'd always known what to do.
As I thought, you picked it up right away.
I set the spice container back on the countertop, feeling a mixture of elation and trepidation.
It isn't difficult at all, is it?
It's not.
But you seem to have mixed feelings about it.
I guess it's just having to face that this is my new reality. Until now, I didn't really think about this aspect much. I've been too busy recovering and being worried about everything else. And now... I blew a stream of air from my lips before settling back to eat my food before it got cold. When did you find out you were an Esper, Lance?
I was around 7 or 8, I suppose. I don't recall it very well since I was so young. But I began training to use it from a young age. My father found a special tutor, someone we could trust not to reveal my status. I don't believe we knew I was a king rank until a little later, though.
On one hand, I keep thinking it's not fair how much being an Esper can direct the path our lives take. On the other hand, every time I want to have a sulk about it, I realize there are so many things in life that can change the course of events. And most of them aren't in our control. I mean, when you consider it, almost nothing about our lives is. When we're born, where we're born, our families, and whether we're Espers.
That's true. Much of the control we assume we have over our circumstances is an illusion.
I suppose it feels unfair because it happened so much later for me. Kids seem much better equipped to roll with changes like this. Maybe it doesn't occur to them to question it. I kind of envy that ability to adapt to everything.
I believe you've done well in adapting.
Well, the company helps, I'm sure. Alright, so I can lift a spice container with telekinesis. I doubt I can use that for self-defense, so what else?
I suppose it depends on the spice. But what other skills do you wish to learn?
I'm not sure. I've done teleportation before, though it was more a panic response. There was also that Psyburst thing I did back at the Vivarium. I don't know much about what it is other than a psychic attack that can cause brain damage. But it can also physically damage things too.
Psi-bursts are concentrated psi energy that are thrown at a target. It's a psychokinetic attack that affects both the physical world and psi fields. That's why you can see them do physical damage. But, as you said, they disrupt synaptic functions of Espers in particular. I understand the principle, but cannot properly create one. Rather than learning attacks, I believe you'd be best served learning defensive strategies.
I understand your logic there, but if I'm attacked again...
It's not just my preference for non-violence. I understand the need to defend oneself sometimes, and that often requires fighting back. However, attacking another person requires many other skills besides just knowing the technique. You have to aim. You have to think calmly during a high-stress situation. And most importantly, you must be willing and able to harm another person. I know. I had to learn those things as Deimos.
I guess Delphine is pretty dangerous, isn't it?
Yes, Delphine is like that sometimes. But New Albion is not, and you've never had to fight like that before.
I learned self-defense techniques from my brother.
With physical self-defense, you are sometimes taught strategies to disable an attacker, but with the proper psionic abilities, you don't need to know that to get away from them.
Are queens good at defense?
Queens are all-rounders at their core. They can be good at everything. But the queens I've watched in the past, or have known, tended to have specialties. Endgame's previous queen was adept at theokinetics, though she was capable of many other skills. For you, I imagine focusing on shields might be a good starting point. And that teleportation ability. It got you out of several difficult situations, though it may prove less reliable in the future. At least at the start, those abilities will serve you best. You can learn other techniques later. There are other basic skills I think you should learn as well, such as a reverse cage.
Like the reverse nets you said are dotted around the waist?
Correct. Reverse cages can block others from finding you, creating dead spots in their psi. It's one of the few techniques we have against the bishop's precognition.
But it's not perfect. I remembered the woman who found us at the Vivarium, and even Lance had initially said they lowered the chance of me being found here. They didn't completely eradicate it.
Not if the bishop is stronger than you. However, that might not be the case for someone with your talent. I can show you the basic principle, though again, it's not something I'm adept at myself.
That could be useful. He was essentially suggesting a strategy of hiding, blocking, and running away. I did think I would eventually need to learn a way to incapacitate someone. But removing myself from danger, or avoiding it altogether, seemed more within my current capabilities. And he was right. I might not be able to knowingly hurt, or worse, kill someone. Even with physical self-defense, as Lance called it, the focus was often on getting away. You learn to incapacitate and disarm someone only because it was often necessary in a physical confrontation. It was very reactive. With teleportation, I could get away without having to jab someone in the eyes or throat first. But incapacitating them first would ensure I could stay away instead of just being pursued. Are there ways to... I don't know... incapacitate someone's psi?
There are psi dampeners, yes. They work in a variety of ways. The goal is to disrupt the person's psi waves by interfering with the phoric system, or else with the nanosystem. They work because, despite having a unique psi fingerprint, most Espers emit very similar psi waves. But that's a device made for that purpose. if you're asking about a psi technique that can do the same. King ranks can sometimes disrupt nano-resonance. It has the effect of decreasing a nano-Esper's psi temporarily. I don't think it's quite the same as what you're talking about.
Have I read about nano-resonance before? Okay, just resonance in general. Okay. I have done that. No, I was imagining something more universal. I wondered if I could do it. Interfere with someone's psi to either cancel out or diminish their psi abilities. Intriguing. Just because Lance didn't know of a technique didn't mean there wasn't one, right? But I didn't see psi as waves. At least not currently. It was color with a specific structure if I was going off Lance and myself. What if I use my psi to disrupt the shape of someone else's psi? Is it possible to manipulate psi with psi? What would that do to someone? Anything? Lance laughed quietly into his tea.
It's so fascinating watching you try to figure something out.
It might be best to try something like a reverse cage first, then a shield? Teleportation seems a little more complicated, but I should probably figure that technique out too.
You've already copied the technique of Ari Vaughn. I can always look into his records. There is quite a lot of research on his ability.
How do you even know that? Have you spent a lot of time lurking in Endgame system?
I get curious. It is the organization I started, after all.
Wait. You founded Endgame?
Is that not taught anymore either?
Not much is taught about the founding of Endgame in general, but I thought it was founded by the caretakers of the Braceil Control Hub, not the AI.
I created it when it became clearer there would be fighting to gain control of the mainframe and my functions. Endgame became my shield. I thought it was a shield for everyone else as well. Protecting myself meant protecting the mainframe, which meant protecting everyone.
A complicated look passed over his face as he said that. He swirled his fork in the bowl in front of him without taking a bite.
It was a selfish decision. One that set into motion so many events I couldn't foresee. Like your experience.
But Endgame has done a lot of good, too.
Yes. Humans are adept at existing in shades of gray. Endgame is also like that.
Shades of gray. That was very apt. Oh my god. How do you just keep getting more cuter outfits? I cannot with these cute outfits. I love them all. It's got little plants on it. After we finished eating and discussing psi techniques a little more, Lance suggested a walk. He had been doing that more now that my leg had recovered so much. He thought it would be good exercise, and I agreed. We had been straying further and further from his habitat on our walks. At first it was just to the lake. Lake Queso. You stop. You did not name a lake after your brother. Adorably, he named it after his brother. Stop! I can't fall in love anymore. It's impossible. I always think, and then this shit happens. Oh, Lance, stop, please. I'm actually, like, teary about that. Oh. Adorably, he named it after his brother, something that never failed to make me smile. Eventually, we started going beyond that. There were so many interesting places near his habitat. Whoa, interesting is right. Hello. Places where the hills stood so close together the wind moaned through sometimes narrow paths. We would walk through them with the sun filtering down on little lizards or wildflowers. There were spots where holes wore through the red sandstone, letting bright beams of light paint everything with a beautiful glow. It was strange there were times that reminded me sharply of images I'd seen at places on Dione, and that would fill me with powerful longing and regret. But somehow that just spurred me to explore even more. Maybe because I wanted to see as much as I could while I had the chance. Lance seemed to know everything about everything. He pointed out various plants or small animals, showed me a trail from a sun snake, or pointed out the horned lizards. Sun snake? Small, bright orange and yellow snakes native to the twilight wastes. They have blue bioluminescent lateral stripes and are quite visually distinctive. Their head has a distinctive triangular shape that they flatten out when threatened, and they generally live in stony outcroppings throughout the wastes. Though they have a potent venom, they are quite shy and will avoid confrontation unless they feel threatened. They are a frequent sight in the wastes, and most know to simply leave them alone. They feed primarily on small rodents, but have been seen consuming birds, lizards, and other prey. Horned skink. A small lizard that resembles some members of the Skinsidae? Maybe? Skinsidae family from Earth. Their name stems from two small protrusions above their eyes, each with a bright spot of bioluminescent coloring on the tip. They inhabit the wastes on both sides of the sea right up to the edge, and they are a very common sight for travelers. They range from tan to orangey brown to green, depending on their location, and are a frequent food source for many of the smaller predators that inhabit the Arcalian wilderness. Because they frequently find their way into the domed cities, they're not an uncommon sight there as well, and because they are easy to care for, are often kept as pets. There were sometimes birds that flew overhead, large, powerful raptors searching for what small prey could be found. He knew every name for everything we encountered, as well as a smattering of facts about them. I'd come to love these walks we had together. But today, Lance wasn't discussing the animals or plants, or sharing any stories about his many creature encounters while he lived here. He was telling me about the principles of psychokinetic shields. I was listening to him as I trailed my fingers over the rough sandstone, fascinated by the fluid-like ripple of rock beneath my fingers.
Based on your description of what you did earlier, I suspect the mental image of manipulating the smoke you see will prove beneficial when learning any of these techniques.
I nodded as I paused to look up the massive wall to where it curved over us. Lance joined me, looking up as well.
Like it?
It's such a beautiful place.
I had a feeling you'd like this spot.
We're not going there. I'm living with this man forever. I'm not leaving. You can't make me leave. I love it. It never ceases to amaze me. In the domes, there was nature everywhere. There were gardens on every corner in Cisalis. They were all there to help with the life support systems. I'm sure you know all about it.
Yes. Delphine is a little more bereft, but I'm familiar with what it's like on the day side.
But somehow it all felt so artificial. Everything was perfectly manicured. Shrubs were trimmed to neat little rectangles, grass kept immaculate. Here things feel more real. Isn't that strange? But everything is just how it is. I don't know how to explain it. There's no attempt to force everything into boxes and squares and manicured rectangles.
Kinda like Endgame.
Things thrive in their natural state and exist as they were meant to exist. I keep standing here in awe of this place, of being here, seeing it, touching it. This rock has been here for thousands of years. It was here when the Thalassans walked this world. Just imagining that is incredible. I looked at him and smiled, laughing at myself a little. Of course, the domes were here then too. And it's just me romanticizing this because it's part of the natural world, as if that makes it somehow better. But there's something about being here that touches a primal part of me, and all these indescribable feelings spill over.
I'm sure those feelings are why you wanted to go into your field of study.
It seems silly when I try to put it into words.
I'm unsure why it seems silly. The emotional response you get from touching a part of nature. The excitement in your voice and expression. I don't find those things silly at all. They're a part of what makes you uniquely beautiful.
Damn.
I find it fascinating.
And like that, my face was on fire again. He always did that to me. I turned away, trying to hide the stupid smile I should not have on my face, but definitely did. It's a shame there can't be more interaction between the domes and the wastes. It would be great if more people could travel and live out here. But I guess they'd have a terrible impact on the environment as well. As it is, it's sustainable because there are so few nomos.
I agree. humans sometimes struggle to find equilibrium. But eventually the domes will fill up and people will turn their eyes to the wastes.
That's far, far in the future.
I hope so.
We started walking again, wandering through the cave. I hadn't said it out loud yet, but the thought of going back was still prominent in my mind. The weight of it was heavy between us, but neither of us mentioned it. I don't think either of us wanted to. I rounded one of the worn sandstone columns and spotted a crevice where the narrow caverns opened back to the outside. Curious, I moved towards it, glancing back at Lance. He was a few meters away, looking at a small plant growing from the cracks in the stone. A smile came to my lips as I decided to see what was on the other side of the crevice, then maybe suggest heading home. The opening appeared to lead to a low, sheltered area between some of the larger hills. I slid closer to look at the area, and... what is that? That looks too symmetrical to be a natural formation. I lost track of everything else for a moment, until I heard Lance's shout.
Morgan, watch out!
The growl from above registered only a second before Lance collided with me, sending me staggering back against the rock wall. I knew something bad was gonna happen. I went sprawling, leg twisting painfully beneath me as I landed face first in the dirt. Wind knocked from my lungs, I lay there a moment before picking myself up, and realizing there was a scuffle going on next to me as Lance wrestled an animal. Its teeth were clamped into his forearm, a vicious snarl on its face as Lance tried to keep himself between me and the animal. I couldn't catch a good look at it, and I was too shocked to do anything but freeze in place. He told me there were some wild animals that were aggressive, but we'd never seen anything, and he said the larger predators stayed closer to the sea. This was a large feline with a faint dusting of spots on its back. And Lance was just... talking to it. Calmly. Even as it snarled and whipped its head from side to side, trying to drag him with it.
Come on now. Do you know how long it's going to take to do repairs if you do that? It's okay. Just calm down.
I was too afraid to even move for fear of drawing its attention. Lance managed to get his free arm around the creature. He wrapped the hand from the arm it was biting around its head as it struggled and leaned down to whisper something to it. My heart rose in my throat as he got his face that close to its mouth, and for one terrifying moment I thought it would snap at him. But in an instant, its body went slack and it released his arm. Huh. Lance let out a soft breath, sinking to his knees as he gently laid the creature on the ground. I scrambled to standing, letting out a cry as I stumbled and fell back to my knees. My leg! Lance was the one who came to me. One of his arms was mangled, the synthetic skin shredded and mechanical parts bared. Oof. Yeah, it got him. Lance! Are you okay? What is that thing?
It's a brush leopard. A young one from the looks of it. I didn't realize there were any lurking in this area. Usually you don't see them out this far. Are you alright? I didn't mean to throw you into the wall.
I'd rather be thrown into the wall than have my arm torn off.
But you hurt your leg again.
When I fell, I think I wrenched it a little. I gingerly lifted his damaged arm. There was no blood, of course, but there was blue fluid dripping out of it.
Don't worry about this. I'll be fine.
You're leaking.
It's just joint lubricant.
Is the leopard...
It's only temporarily stunned. We should leave. Come on.
He wrapped his good arm around me and pulled me to my feet. I winced again, hoping I hadn't done too much damage. I hadn't healed from the last injuries, and now I was hurting myself again. What did you do to it?
It's a psi technique. Not really my normal specialty. But I've had a long time to observe Espers. I've picked up a few tricks. That one's a bit more difficult to use on humans, though.
Do you go around stunning animals a lot?
No, but I have learned it's useful for them. Their minds aren't as complex as human minds, so you can find their trigger points easier and put them into a sort of trance. I won't say it hasn't come in handy here and there.
Interesting. Does that mean animals also have, like, these nanobots in them, or are you just, like, using nerves to stun them, or what?
Can you walk okay?
I think so. It feels like I pulled something when I fell earlier. It's not that bad.
Just hold on to me, okay?
Trust me, I'm not letting go.
Well, they like to live near water, but it wouldn't be living near my lake either. They usually stick to areas with very dense, low-lying ground cover and shrubs. This wouldn't even be an ideal place for it. Most of their prey would be sparse here.
Was it a pet? Because she found, like, an unusual rock formation, which makes me think it was, like, cut like someone's living there. Are they having, like, animal fights? Is it a pet? I don't know.
But I should have been more alert just in case. It's easy to get complacent.
You think it was just passing through, then?
Probably. They roam a pretty wide territory. I know it wasn't living in that cave for sure.
I watched him work one-handed on his injured arm while I sat on the sofa with my leg elevated. Lance said I hadn't hurt it badly. It should be fine after a brief rest, which was a relief. I was also nursing a bruise where I hit that sandstone wall, though. We were fortunate Lance's arm was cybernetic. That injury would have been terrible otherwise.
Are you going to be afraid to go on walks going forward?
Of course not. Don't get me wrong, that surprised me. I wasn't at all prepared for it, and it's scary to think about what almost happened. But that was my fault for not being aware of the dangers. As long as I know what's out there and what to be prepared for, there's no reason to avoid exploring. Besides, right before the brush leopard attack, I thought I saw something interesting.
Oh? You mean on the other side of that opening you were in front of? What do you think you saw?
Well, I can't say for sure because I only got a glimpse. Are there any structures in this area?
Structures? Out here? Not that I know of. But to be honest, I haven't explored that area much at all. I tend to stay out of the caverns or enclosed areas. I prefer wider spaces, so most of my walks are out under the sky.
You haven't been to that spot the entire time you've been here?
It's a sizable area. There are plenty of other places to explore, too.
Do you think we could check it out again? I mean, just to figure out what that was that I saw. Lance smiled again, going back to work on his arm.
I knew you'd say that. We'll go back when your leg is better, but we'll be cautious this time.
I'm glad that she, like, remembered it and it wasn't like, in the shock, I forgot about this interesting thing I saw. Lance spent the rest of the evening tinkering with his arm, and I spent it trying to get the hang of shields while he gave me tips from across the room. If anything, that minor incident with the brush leopard had almost been a wake-up call to how unprepared I was for any sort of attack. I completely froze up. Though I didn't have any sort of training under my belt, I could have tried something to help Lance. And instead I just sat there in terror. Not only had I been unaware of the pending danger, I couldn't do anything useful during the situation. That I had to work on. Reacting to danger had to become second nature before I could even think of going back to the domes, no matter where I ended up. Today showed me I wasn't even close to ready. That thought quickly overtook any lingering fear I might have about exploring. In many ways, the domes were far more dangerous. So if I couldn't even safely take a walk here, how would I manage back there? It was clearer than ever that I had a long journey ahead of me.